What's up guys, I'm Caleb Kosteriki and today we're doing a Proven Progression product install. Today I am putting ROX tunnel grips on this 146 9R. I really like tunnel grips on all of my sleds. These aren't good for just jumping. They're really good to have on your sled no matter what type of riding you do, especially if you're an aggressive rider. These are gonna give you an advantage anytime you're riding in a neutral position, whether that's re-entries, riding up a ravine, hopping creeks, riding a rough trail. They really help you stick with the sled anytime both feet are on the running boards. Tunnel grips are a super easy thing to install, but it gets a little more complicated to put them on the way I do. I like to run them really high and fold it underneath the gas tank. I feel like it looks the best and it provides the best traction on the side of my leg doing it that way. So this video is going to go through all the details of how to do that safely without putting a hole in your intercooler. So for this install, you're going to need a 3/16 bit and a 3/32 bit. Going to obviously need tunnel grips. I like the ROX rivet-on tunnel grips. These are my favorite. You're going to need lath screws that we're going to cut down with the grinder to make shorter. Just a standard pair of scissors, something to mark with, razor blade or knife, drill, a 10mm impact and socket, and then rivet gun. Let's open this up and see what we get with these. So we have these stainless rivets that are included. Personally, I don't really like the look of stainless rivets on the black. So I do two things. Either I color match with rivets and do red, so I match the design on the sled, or I do black rivets so they blend in and you don't really see them. The first thing I'm going to do is cut these to fit the shape of the sled a little bit better. And like I said before, I'm just using a cheap household pair of scissors for that. So if you want to do this the easy way, you can put this right down here on the running board and you can just drill out and rivet this on. I'm going to show you the little bit more complex way that I think looks really clean, which is tucking it under the gas tank, putting screws in here, and then rivets down here. But first, we need to notch this. So I'm gonna slide it over and do like a rough scribe here. Start with it long and then just kind of notch it in. Took me a few tries to get this cut right, but you just kind of trim it and keep sliding it in until you don't have a gap here. It just follows the edge of this piece of aluminum. So I like that. I don't like having a squared off corner here, so I'm going to round to this corner, and then I'm going to copy what I did on this one to the opposite side. You could get all crazy putting a radius on this, but you know what? I just eyeball it and call it good, something like that. Once you have the first one cut how you want it, take it and place it over the top of your second one. Take note that the ROX should be up on both of them and they should be faced together so you're transferring the marks properly. And I'll show you why that's important in a minute. I'll get this lined up, transfer my marks, and then we'll double check it before we cut anything. Once you transferred your marks, take it over to the opposite side of the sled and make sure you put your marks in the right spot. The first time I did this, I put my tunnel grip on upside down. I cut it and didn't realize I cut it wrong until it was too late. And then I had to spend the whole season riding with ROX upside down, which looked kind of dumb. And I felt really dumb. Before we start putting these on, I want to mark it out. And all I'm going to do is put a little tick mark where I want the top line of screws to be. So we'll start at the end. We're going to count 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. This isn't exactly where the screw will go. I just want to make sure I know which one of these windows to put it in. We'll do the same spacing on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. All the way across. This last one is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you're not going to notice because the spacing is close enough that it's not going to catch your eye. And this is important if you're color coding your rivets, like using a bright red rivet. It's going to be really obvious if your spacing's off. If you're using black rivets, you don't have to be this precise with your spacing. You can just eyeball it. But we want to install this and make it look as good as possible, so we're going the extra mile with this one. Before I put these tunnel grips on, I'm going to loosen this gas tank and lift it up a little bit. I'm going to stick a screwdriver under there to act as a spacer. And I'm going to cut some of this foam back. They have a foam layer, and I just need to cut it back just a tiny bit so the tunnel grip can stick in there. Sweet, that's looking good. I want to shove this far enough in that these nubs are just hitting the gas tank. Sweet, I like that. So now we're gonna go cut our screws down so we can start at the top here and screw this down. So the intercooler is right behind this. There's a small gap between the intercooler and the tunnel bend right here. It's just big enough that you can get a few threads of a screw to hold without the screw rubbing on the intercooler. But if you drill this for a rivet, there's not nearly enough room. You're just gonna hit your intercooler and then your intercooler is gonna leak. So that's a big issue. Self-tappers are also too long and won't work. You have to take a screw and shorten the screw with a grinder to make this work. This is that gap I was talking about. Just barely enough room to get a few threads of a screw to hold. There's probably other screws that work good, but this is what I've been using. They're number 8 lath screws, and they're 9/16 long. And I'm going to cut this right about here. So if you buy a shorter screw, you would think like, oh, then you don't have to cut it. But the issue is the end's too tapered, and you want a nice flat end on your screw because you don't want that sharp point rubbing on your intercooler if it just happens to be a hair too long. So cutting it almost in half, but right about there is going to give us the right length screw. So I would say we're shooting for like 1/4. Yeah, we'll cut this to 1/4 and should be good to go. My least favorite part of putting this product on is cutting these little screws. I just hold it with a vice grip and take a cutting wheel and go for it. Gonna need 12 of these if you follow the same screw pattern that I did. So I have 12 of these cut. Nothing crazy, basically just cutting the tips off. All right, let's get some tunnel grips installed. I'm going to try to center my screws in these like squares in between the nubs. So I'll put a screw there, 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 and so on. But I also want to make sure I'm not going too high or too low. I kind of want to keep this roughly this angle and hit this part of the tunnel because that's where the biggest gap is between the tunnel and the cooler. So I guess I'm just gonna try to keep it centered, but if I have to move my screws down to keep it in the right spot on the tunnel, that takes priority. And that's it. As soon as you go through that first layer, stop, or you'll drill into your coolers. Now I'm taking a screw that's not cut and kind of tapping some threads. Just putting that in just a little ways to get the thread started. Taking one of my cut screws and driving that in. As I go down this line, putting screws in, I want to make sure I'm shoving this tunnel grip into the gas tank as far as I can. This is definitely a process, probably a lot more involved than most people want to get with installing tunnel grips, but it just looks so clean. And the reason why I like getting this tunnel grip around the bend of the tunnel is it causes these nubs here to stick out a little bit farther, and it gives you a little more traction on the side of your foot than if this was sitting all the way down here. The majority of your ability to squeeze the sled is right here, like this section of the tunnel here. when you squeeze the sled with your legs, you're not really getting force down here. It's all right in this area. So that's how to make tunnel grips the most effective, is placing it right here. But if you decide to mount it lower down and do it the easy way, they're still going to give you a huge advantage over not having anything at all. This is, again, just like a really intense way to put them on to maximize the benefits you can get out of tunnel grips. Now that this top line of screws is in, we can do the bottom line of rivets. I'm going to push down on this and try to stretch it down the best I can. The tunnel grip's mounted, so I'm going to pull the screwdriver out and tighten the gas tank back down. And the last thing I'm going to do is paint these screw heads. There's a few options. You can Sharpie it. This is just like some black paint I got from a job site. I have no idea where this came from. This works great. You can go on Tinder and try to find a gothic girl and take her nail polish. Basically anything that's black that'll stick to metal. If the silver screw head doesn't bother you, then just leave it raw. But I prefer to try to make it blend in a little bit and not catch your eye. I'll let that dry and then do another coat. When you're putting your right side tunnel grip on, I highly recommend taking a picture of your VIN. And I even like to cut my VIN out of my wrap like this, just in case you have to get to it. And then take a picture of this so you have it for your records, or if the boarder asks you for your VIN, you can show them a picture of it. They still might require you to take this off. That's rare, but occasionally the border crossing guys will be real dicks. That was the install of the rivet on version. ROX also has an adhesive version, which I like to use anytime I can't put holes in a sled. So I'll use this like when I'm traveling and I'm on a borrowed sled or on a rental sled. And then today for this video, we're gonna put it on this 165 Boost so you can see how to put these on. One of the biggest questions I get with these is whether you can put these on over the top of a wrap. You can, if you really set the adhesive of the wrap with a heat gun and then do the same with this. So that is a possibility, but if you're not really careful with getting that wrap set good, it's just gonna rip the wrap off, because this will stick really good to the wrap. Normally the weak point is the wrap adhesive to the tunnel. But I'll show you a few tips and tricks to make that work. So first we're gonna cut this in half because this is super wide. We don't need that much width. And that way we can get 2 sleds worth out of these. Or 11 1/4, do 5 5/8 here. Yeah, so 5 5/8 is dead center. Put a straight edge on that, and then we'll cut it with a pair of scissors. The adhesive ones are a little bit shorter than the Rivet-On model, so I'm not actually going to notch this out into the front of the sled here. I'm just gonna put it on basically like this. If you want to notch it, you can. Most of the time when tunnel grips benefit you, it's when your foot is right here. So it's fine if this is slid forward and you notch it out, but I just don't feel like that's necessary. Visually, you're not really going to even see this tunnel grip because it's black on black. If you had a bright colored wrap here, you know, maybe you'd want to notch this out just so it looks better and looks a little cleaner. But, you know, black on black application, this is going to be fine just like this. I do need to cut some of this foam out right under the gas tank here so it can slide under there. So I'll cut that foam out and then prep this to stick it on. You can clean this with any type of household cleaner. Personally, what I like to use to clean sleds is isopropyl alcohol. You can use this before putting your wraps on, or really any adhesive to your sled. It works really good and is super cheap. So the key to having this adhesive make it through a season or a couple seasons is 1, cleaning it like we just did, and then 2, setting the adhesive with a heat gun. So if you're putting this on over the top of a wrap, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to want to clean the surface, put your wrap on, blast that with the heat gun, make sure that that adhesive is really set good, and then go over the top of your wrap with your tunnel grip. And I think you'll have pretty good success with that. I've done that a few times and didn't have any issues with my tunnel grips pulling off. I'll go about there. So I'm gonna get this top edge underneath the gas tank. Now when you push this down, make sure you start at the top. We don't want any air bubbles.
just like you're putting a wrap on. And now we'll set it with, set the adhesive with a heat gun. And I'm just gonna go over the entire thing, getting it warm and pushing it into the tunnel. The edges are especially important because that's where it's gonna wanna start to pull up. And then that's it. That's the install of the adhesive ones. Obviously, it's a lot easier to put these on than the Rivet-On model, but I like the size of the nubs on the Rivet-On model, so I feel like I get a little more advantage with the tunnel grips with the bigger nubs, and then having a little extra distance or width to the tunnel grip. But you know, if you don't want to go through all that work, this is a great option, like I mentioned before. Just want to show you a side-by-side comparison here. Obviously, these nubs are a lot bigger. I really like this and prefer this. And for me, it's worth the extra work to rivet on this version. But I would much rather have this one than nothing at all. So if you don't want to do the work, you know, stick with the adhesive one. But if you want the best setup possible for your sled, then get the Rivet-On model. That finishes up our tunnel grip install video. You can get these from the Rox website or from Freshies Built. Thanks for watching, guys. And let me know what you think in the comments.